The headline hit the internet like a lightning bolt. Just in, Ketanji Jackson loses it as Supreme Court tears Democrats apart. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Phones buzzing, social feeds exploding, news alerts popping up faster than anyone could read them. People didn't even stop to check what had really happened. They just reacted. Some were furious, others cheered, and most were simply confused. It was another day in the fast, noisy world of breaking news, where emotion often ran ahead of truth. In a small cafe near the courthouse, 3 friends were sitting together, scrolling through their phones as the headline flashed across the mounted TV. Nora, a 27-year-old law student with a calm but determined face, stared at the screen, shaking her head. "This is so exaggerated," she muttered. She didn't lose it. She disagreed, with conviction. There's a difference. Across from her sat Evan, a political blogger known for stirring up online debates. He smirked without looking up. "That's how media works, Nora. Passion equals outrage. Outrage equals clicks." Rachel, a high school civics teacher, leaned back with her tea, her tone gentle but firm. "It's a shame, though. The public needs clarity, not drama. People see a headline like that and think the court's at war." Outside, rain tapped lightly against the cafe window. Inside, the air felt thick with tension, not from anger, but from exhaustion. The Supreme Court had just handed down a divided ruling on a controversial policy. The decision had split not only the justices but also the country. For weeks, it had been the main topic at workplaces, schools, and dinner tables. And now, this new headline seemed to throw gasoline on the fire. Nora set her phone down. "You know, my classmates are already fighting about this online. Half of them are calling Justice Jackson a hero. The other half say she's too emotional for the bench. But no one's talking about the case itself." Evan nodded slightly. "Because the details are boring. People don't want nuance, they want sides. If you make them think too much, they scroll away." Rachel looked from one to the other. "And that's exactly why this country feels broken. Everything's either black or white, right or wrong, Team A or Team B. There's no in-between anymore." For a few seconds, none of them spoke. The cafe TV replayed a clip of Justice Jackson's strong dissenting statement. Her tone was passionate, yes, but measured, thoughtful, not angry. Yet the headline told a completely different story. Nora felt a twinge of frustration. She's standing for what she believes is fair. Since when did speaking with emotion become a flaw? Evan leaned forward, his expression sharp. Since people stopped listening and started judging. Every word gets turned into a weapon. If she stays quiet, they call her weak. If she speaks up, they say she's losing it. Rachel sighed. "It's like we've forgotten that disagreement is part of the process. The Supreme Court isn't supposed to agree on everything. That's why there's more than one justice." A group at a nearby table was also discussing the same headline. Their voices rose, one side arguing about bias, the other defending free expression. The noise grew until the cafe felt like a miniature version of the country itself, divided, tense, and uncertain. Nora watched them, feeling a mix of sadness and curiosity. "Do you think people even care what's true anymore?" she asked softly. Evan shrugged. "People care about what makes them feel right." Rachel frowned. "That's dangerous. Feelings aren't facts. You can't build justice on outrage." The conversation moved quickly now, ideas bouncing between them. They talked about how easily narratives could twist, how social media rewarded emotion over accuracy, and how even intelligent people could get swept up in online storms. Every headline, every clip, every quote seemed designed to make someone angry. Evan admitted he'd once written articles with sharp titles just to drive engagement. "It worked," he said, almost guilty. "But after a while, I started noticing something. The more clicks I got, the less people actually read the content. They reacted to the title, not the truth." Nora's eyes softened. "So what's the point of reporting if no one cares to understand?" He looked down at his coffee. "To get people to care again, maybe." As the rain outside grew heavier, Rachel's phone buzzed, messages from her students. Some were asking about the Supreme Court decision, others were sharing memes mocking the justices. "They're too young to know how serious this is," she said, worried. "All they see is the drama." Nora nodded slowly. "Maybe that's The problem: everyone's performing outrage instead of processing ideas. There was a pause as they each considered what that meant. The cafe had grown quieter now, most people staring at their screens instead of speaking. The glow from the news ticker reflected off their faces. Rachel broke the silence. "You know what's funny? For all the shouting, people on both sides want the same thing: fairness. They just define it differently." Evan smiled faintly. "Yeah. But in this climate, saying that out loud makes you sound indecisive." Nora finished her drink, pushing the empty cup aside. "Maybe we need less certainty and more curiosity. Justice isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be honest." Her words hung in the air, quiet, but powerful. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The headline on TV changed again. Another breaking update. Another burst of noise. But the friends had stopped paying attention. For the first time that day, they weren't just reacting to the news. They were questioning it. Nora looked at the others. If people saw the full story, not just the clip, they'd understand that disagreement isn't chaos. It's how the system's built. Evan leaned back. "Good luck convincing the internet of that." Rachel smiled gently. "Then maybe we start small, one conversation at a time." The story wasn't about Justice Jackson anymore. It wasn't even about politics. It was about the fragile thread that held discussion together. The idea that disagreement, when done with respect, wasn't destruction, but growth. As they got up to leave, Nora glanced one last time at the TV. The same video played again, but this time she noticed something new. The calm expression on Justice Jackson's face after speaking. It wasn't anger. It was conviction. And that was the moment Nora understood. The problem wasn't passion. It was perception. People were mistaking care for chaos, courage for conflict. When the cafe door closed behind them, the noise of the world continued. But inside each of them, something had shifted. A quiet realization that maybe truth wasn't loud, but patient. It didn't demand attention. It waited to be heard. That night, as the city lights reflected on the wet streets, Nora couldn't shake the thought. Maybe the country didn't need louder arguments. Maybe it just needed better listeners. The next morning, the headline was everywhere. On phones, in office chatter, on talk shows, and across social media timelines that never seemed to sleep. The clip of Justice Ketanji Jackson's heated dissent was being replayed again and again, each outlet adding its own spin. Some called her brave for standing up to the court's conservative majority, others accused her of being too emotional. But what really spread wasn't her words. It was people's reactions. Every debate, every tweet, every short video was another echo in a country already split down the middle. At the cafe, the same three friends, Nora, Evan, and Rachel, gathered again, each carrying their own version of exhaustion. But this time, they weren't alone. Marcus, Nora's older brother, joined them. He worked as a public defender, and had spent the last few nights reading every opinion and legal commentary about the case. His voice carried the weight of someone used to hearing both sides of every argument. Evan was the first to speak. "You know what's wild? Every news channel is using different footage. Some cut the start, others skip her reasoning, and one network even changed the caption mid-sentence. It's like no one wants people to actually listen. They just want them to pick a side." Marcus stirred his coffee slowly. "That's because the case isn't just about law anymore. It's about what people believe the law should be. Some say justice should adapt with the times, evolve to fit modern values. Others say it should stay fixed to protect fairness, and both sides think they're saving the country." Rachel nodded, thinking about her students. "In my class, half the kids say the court's outdated, and the other half think it's the only thing keeping order. No one's wrong for caring, but they all argue like the other side is evil." Nora sat quietly, scrolling through her phone. She saw comment threads filled with insults, memes mocking the justices, and strangers tearing each other apart. "It's strange," she said finally. Justice Jackson's point was about balance, about fairness. But everyone turned it into a fight. Evan leaned forward. "That's because conflict sells. If people agreed, there'd be nothing to talk about. Drama keeps the clicks coming." Marcus gave a small smile. "Maybe. But we also can't pretend this isn't emotional. These rulings affect people's lives. For some, it's not about politics. It's about feeling seen or ignored. That made Rachel pause. She looked at Marcus with curiosity. So what do you think? Was Justice Jackson right? He shrugged. I think she did what any honest judge should. Spoke her mind. But the bigger problem is how people treat disagreement like betrayal. You can't run a democracy if people believe that being challenged means being attacked. Nora thought about that. It's weird, though. In class, we're taught that dissenting opinions in the Supreme Court are part of the system, that disagreement actually helps refine the law. But in real life, when someone disagrees, it turns into a war. Evan gave a bitter laugh. Because we stopped respecting dissent. Everyone wants validation, not discussion. Rachel sighed. The students in my debate club are the same. They don't listen to respond. They listen to win. Outside, the cafe window, the morning rush passed by. People hurrying to work, earbuds in, eyes on their screens. Inside, the conversation deepened. They weren't just talking about the court anymore. They were talking about how disagreement had lost its meaning in modern life. Marcus leaned back. You know what's ironic? Both sides are fighting for the same idea. Justice. They just define it differently. But instead of talking, they're shouting past each other. Evan nodded. Yeah, and media doesn't help. It turns everything into a battle. People forget the Supreme Court's supposed to debate. It's literally built for disagreement. Nora tilted her head. But maybe that's what scares people. Seeing division in the highest court makes them feel like everything's falling apart. Rachel smiled faintly. Or maybe it shows us that disagreement is normal. That even the smartest people in the country can argue without hating each other. Evan pointed at the TV above the counter. Tell that to the anchors. They've been calling this a meltdown all morning. The news ticker scrolled with new commentary. Politicians giving statements, analysts dissecting tone and emotion. Online influencers turning the issue into content. Nora turned away from the screen. I wish people cared this much about understanding as they do about reacting. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. That's the thing, Nora. People want quick answers. But justice isn't quick. It's supposed to make you think. And thinking takes time. The conversation shifted again. Faster now, like a stream that found its current. They talked about how technology had turned everyone into instant judges. How one clip could erase years of context. Rachel told them about her students sharing short videos that simplified complex cases into slogans. They say they're learning politics, she said, but they're learning outrage. Evan added, and outrage is addictive. Every headline, every post, it's designed to make you pick a side. The algorithm doesn't want you to understand. It wants you to react. Nora sighed. But if the system feeds division, how do we break it? Marcus smiled faintly. By doing exactly what we're doing right now. Talking without trying to win. For a moment, the table grew quiet again. The cafe's soft background music filled the silence. Nora's eyes wandered to the window, watching the people outside rushing through their day. It's sad, though, she said. When I started law school, I thought the justice system was about truth. Now it feels like it's about narrative. Evan looked at her with understanding. Maybe it's always been both. The truth doesn't sell, but stories do, and people shape stories to fit their beliefs. Rachel smiled gently. Then maybe it's our job to remind people that truth still matters, even when it's not exciting. Marcus nodded in agreement. Justice Jackson's dissent wasn't about sides, it was about principle. But people heard anger instead of reasoning. That says more about us than it does about her. The conversation carried on for another hour, bouncing between law, media, and morality. Each person brought their own lens. Nora's idealism, Evan's realism, Rachel's optimism, Marcus's experience. By the end, they hadn't solved anything, but they'd reached something rare, understanding. As they got up to leave, Rachel said quietly, "Maybe we can't fix the noise out there, but we can choose how we listen." Evan smiled. And maybe that's how it starts. Not with silence, but with better conversations. Outside, the city hummed with energy. News vans parked by the courthouse. Reporters waited for another statement. Online, New headlines were already forming. Louder, sharper, more dramatic. But in that small cafe, the noise didn't matter. Nora looked back once before stepping out. "You know," she said, "for a country that argues so much, we've forgotten that disagreement can actually bring us closer." Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder. "It still can. We just have to remember that the goal of a debate isn't to destroy the other side. It's to find the truth in between." As they walked away, the sound of their laughter blended with the city's hum. For once, it felt like the world hadn't ended over a headline. Maybe it was still possible to argue without tearing apart, to disagree and still walk out the same door together. The days after the ruling felt heavier, like the air itself carried arguments. Everywhere Nora went, campus, social media, even family group chats, people were still debating the Supreme Court's decision. Justice Ketanji Jackson's name was on every screen, every podcast, every news headline. But by now, the story wasn't just about the case. It was about emotion, about what people expected from power and how much passion was too much for someone in a black robe. Rachel felt the tension in her classroom. Her students had always loved open discussions, but lately, every debate turned personal. When she mentioned the case, hands shot up, not to ask questions, but to accuse. "She's too political," one student said. Another fired back, "She's the only one standing up for what's right." Voices got louder until it wasn't about law anymore. It was about identity. Rachel tried to calm them down, but she saw something unsettling in their faces. They didn't want to understand each other. They wanted to win. Later that evening, she texted Nora and Evan, "We need to talk. Everything's getting worse." When Nora got the message, she was sitting at home, scrolling through yet another online thread full of people calling Justice Jackson emotional, biased, or worse. She closed her laptop, frustrated. She wasn't angry at the criticism. She was angry at how shallow it all was. No one was reading her words, just reacting to her tone. Nora's mother called from the kitchen, her voice careful. "You've been quiet since the decision. What's wrong?" Nora looked up. "It's not even about the case anymore, Mom. It's about how people treat anyone who disagrees. Everyone's shouting and nobody's listening." Her father, reading the paper at the table, added softly, "People argue when they care, but when caring turns into contempt, that's when justice loses meaning." That stuck with her. Later that night, Nora called her mentor, retired Judge Elaine Porter, someone she deeply respected. "Judge Porter," she began, "how do you stay calm when everyone's emotional about a case?" The older woman chuckled. "You don't avoid emotion, Nora. You understand it. Law without compassion is just paperwork. But you also can't let passion cloud judgment. The key is balance, conviction without chaos." Nora hesitated. "Do you think Justice Jackson crossed that line?" "No," Elaine replied firmly. She reminded people that the law isn't cold. It affects real lives. Passion in defense of justice isn't weakness. It's humanity. But the public doesn't always see it that way. They mistake empathy for bias. After they hung up, Nora sat by her window, thinking about those words. The city outside was alive with noise, car horns, sirens, chatter. But she felt oddly still. Maybe what people feared wasn't disagreement itself, but emotion in places they expected detachment. Yet, how could anyone fight for fairness without feeling something? The next day, she met Evan and Rachel at the cafe again. Rachel looked drained. "I couldn't believe it," she said. "My students turned a classroom discussion into a battlefield." One of them said, "If you don't pick a side, you're part of the problem." I didn't even know how to answer. Evan rubbed his temples. "That's the whole world right now. Everyone's either outraged or silent. No middle ground." Nora took a deep breath. "I called Judge Porter last night. She said something that really hit me. That passion isn't the problem. It's perception. People think being emotional means being irrational. But sometimes emotion is just a sign you care deeply about what's right." Rachel smiled faintly. "That makes sense. But we've trained people to think calmness equals control. Maybe that's why everyone calls strong women emotional. Because they're not used to hearing feeling with authority." Evan looked up. "You're saying people mistake intensity for instability?" Exactly, Nora said. Justice Jackson wasn't losing control. She was defending her principles. But the narrative turned her conviction into chaos because that's easier to sell. Evan leaned back. That's the real tragedy. The system rewards outrage, not reason. Rachel nodded. And the saddest part? The kids see this every day. They're learning that being loud matters more than being right. The group fell silent for a while, each lost in thought. Then Evan said, "So what do? We can't change the media or the internet." Nora looked thoughtful. "Maybe we start by changing how we talk. If we can have these conversations, really have them. Maybe others will too." That night, inspired by their talk, Nora wrote an article for her law school's blog. It wasn't about the ruling itself, but about the way society handled disagreement. The title read, "When Did Passion Become a Problem?" In it, she argued that strong emotion in the pursuit of justice shouldn't be feared, but respected. That empathy and strength weren't opposites, but partners in truth. She shared it with Evan before publishing. He read it silently, then said, "This is what people need to read. Not another argument, but a reminder." Within hours of posting it, the article started spreading. Students, professors, and even a few journalists shared it online. But what surprised Nora most were the comments. Not angry or mocking, but thoughtful. People wrote about their own experiences. Teachers who had been criticized for caring too much, judges who had been told to tone it down, citizens who felt unheard because they didn't fit into political boxes. Rachel read the comments aloud the next morning in her classroom, and for the first time all week her students listened without interrupting. They didn't all agree, but they reflected. Some even apologized for shouting. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, Evan wrote a follow-up post on his blog titled, "The Cost of Outrage." He talked about how quick judgments were making people blind to meaning. He admitted that as a writer, he had once contributed to the noise. But now he wanted to change that. His readers responded positively, sharing stories about stepping back from the endless scroll of anger. Nora's inbox filled with messages. Law students thanking her, lawyers debating respectfully, even strangers expressing hope that maybe public discourse could still improve. She smiled reading them, realizing how powerful words could be when they came from sincerity, not spectacle. That evening, she met Judge Porter for coffee. "I read your article," the judge said warmly. "You reminded people that disagreement isn't a failure. It's part of progress," Nora smiled. "I think people just needed someone to say it out loud." The judge nodded. "That's the beauty of reason. It doesn't need to shout to be heard." As Nora walked home that night, the city lights glowed softly, and for the first time since the chaos began, she felt hopeful. Maybe not everyone was lost to the noise. Maybe people still wanted to think, not just react, and somewhere on a distant TV, another headline scrolled. But this time, Nora didn't look. She didn't need the noise to tell her what mattered. She already knew. Passion without understanding divides. But passion with empathy builds bridges. And that was the lesson she would carry forward. In law, in life, and in every conversation that followed. By the weekend, the storm had started to quiet down. The breaking news banners were slower, the hashtags less fiery, and the endless online shouting had lost some of its energy. People seemed tired of being angry. In the middle of that calm, the cafe where everything had started felt almost peaceful again. Nora, Evan, Rachel, and Marcus met at their usual table. The same corner by the window where they had argued and reflected all week. This time, though, the air felt different. Lighter, almost hopeful. On the cafe's TV, the same network that once blared dramatic headlines now played a calm discussion segment. The anchor spoke with a measured tone. In the wake of the Supreme Court's heated debate, Americans are rethinking what justice, fairness, and dialogue truly mean. Nora smiled faintly as she stirred her coffee. "At least they're not calling it a meltdown anymore," she said. Evan chuckled. "Guess someone finally realized that shouting every headline doesn't make people smarter." Rachel, leaning back with her tea, added, "Maybe people are ready to hear something real again. Not noise, not outrage, and just understanding." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's the cycle, isn't it? The noise burns itself out, and what's left is the truth. Quiet, steady, patient." The four of them looked around the cafe. It was busier than usual, full of people chatting in low voices, some discussing the ruling, others just enjoying their coffee. For once, it felt like everyone was talking, not fighting. Nora thought back to everything that had happened over the past few days. The anger, the headlines, the debates. It had all started with one emotional moment in court, blown up into a symbol of division. But maybe, in a strange way, it had forced people to confront something deeper. How disagreement had become a threat instead of a tool. Evan looked thoughtful. You know what's crazy? I checked the engagement numbers on my latest post. The one where I talked about understanding instead of outrage. It got fewer clicks than usual, but the comments were different. People were actually talking to each other instead of attacking. Rachel smiled. That's a good thing. Maybe real conversations don't trend, but they heal. Marcus looked at them one by one. Healing takes time. The court's decision didn't divide the country, or the reactions did. We've all forgotten that democracy depends on disagreement. The justices argue because they care about the same constitution, just in different ways. The rest of us should learn from that. Nora looked down at her notebook, where she had jotted thoughts for a new article. Maybe that's what Justice Jackson was really trying to remind everyone, that justice isn't about silence. It's about courage to speak, even when others don't like what you say. Evan nodded. Yeah, but courage is not loud. It's steady, like when you hold your ground without shouting. Outside, the sky was bright after days of clouds. Sunlight poured through the window, casting golden stripes across their table. For the first time all week, none of them felt the weight of division pressing down on them. It was as if the city itself had exhaled. Rachel watched a couple at the next table laughing over coffee. You know what's beautiful? She said softly. After all that chaos, people still show up, still talk, still believe in something better. That's hope right there. Nora smiled. Yeah. Hope that maybe we can disagree and still move forward together. Marcus leaned back, thoughtful. You can't build unity by pretending everyone thinks the same. Real unity comes from learning how to stand beside people you don't fully agree with. The cafe's door opened, letting in a soft breeze. The TV above them played one last clip from the court. Justice Jackson's calm words near the end of her statement. Justice isn't about which side wins. It's about who's willing to listen. The entire table went quiet. Evan looked up at the screen and said, It's funny, they called her emotional, but she sounds like the only calm person in the whole country. Nora laughed. Maybe calm doesn't trend, Marcus smiled. But calm lasts longer. They all sat there, letting the moment sink in. The noise outside, car horns, chatter, city hum, felt softer somehow. Nora realized that this was what people forgot in times of chaos. Calm was contagious too. One act of reason could ripple outward. One quiet truth could outlive 1,000 loud lies. Rachel opened her notebook and scribbled something. What's that? Nora asked. Rachel smiled. Lesson plan. I'm going to have my students study this case. Not the politics, but the communication. I want them to learn how to debate with empathy. That's brilliant, Marcus said. Teach them that disagreement isn't disrespect. Evan checked his phone and grinned. Looks like your article's being shared by a legal podcast. People are quoting your line about passion and perception. Nora looked surprised. Seriously? Seriously, he said. Guess calm words can still go viral. They laughed, and for a moment the whole cafe felt lighter. Around them, other conversations filled the room. People reflecting, asking questions, sharing perspectives. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. After a while, they decided to step outside. The sun was setting, painting the city in gold and orange. The courthouse stood tall in the distance, a symbol of both division and unity, depending on how you looked at it. Nora paused to take it in. You know, she said quietly, I used to think justice was about winning. Now, I think it's about understanding why people fight in the first place. Marcus nodded. Justice is human. It's messy, complicated, and emotional. But that's what makes it real. Evan put his hands in his pockets. And if people can see that, really see that, maybe the shouting will fade. Rachel smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just get quieter, one conversation at a time. As they walked down the street, the city buzzed softly around them, no longer angry, just alive. The latest headlines still scrolled across a newsstand screen nearby, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It was just another moment in an endless story of people learning, clashing, and trying again to find balance. Nora felt something peaceful settle inside her. For the first time in days, she wasn't frustrated or anxious. She just felt grounded, reminded that even when the world seems divided, understanding always begins small. One article, one discussion, one cafe table full of people willing to listen. When they reached the corner, Evan stopped. So what now? Nora smiled. We keep talking. That's how change starts. Marcus added, and we teach others to listen. Rachel laughed. Imagine that. A country where listening is trending. They all laughed with her as they crossed the street, the laughter carrying through the cool evening air. Somewhere behind them, the TV inside the cafe replayed the same headline that had started it all. But this time, it didn't sound like chaos. It sounded like conversation. And maybe that was the quiet victory no one would ever headline. That amid all the shouting, some people still chose to listen.